Hello, I am talking about when I grew up in Scientology. I was born to Scientology, and one of the main things I was taught as a little kid that psychiatric medication and psychiatry, therapists, and anything to do with psychology was 1000% evil, because psychiatry and that type of a situation was brought here by suppressive individuals, and that's what L. Ron Hubbard taught us. Suppressive people basically equal to evil, bad people. That's how I learned what suppressive meant, and that's what it meant to me as a child. So, thinking of psychiatry and psychology, they use that to completely scare the hell out of you as a Scientologist, especially when you're a little kid. They tell you that if you're going to have anything to do with psychiatry or psychology, that basically they will put you in an institution, they will drug you up, and they'll drug you up with psychiatric medication, and if you take that medication, you'll be like one of those crazy people on the street that are talking to themselves, screaming and yelling like a psychopath. And you're also told, per policy, if you take psychiatric medication, you now would be labeled a illegal PC, which means you cannot do Scientology auditing. And in Scientology, the way you can go up the levels to their so-called total freedom, their bridge of total freedom, would be clearly to do auditing. So if you've taken these psychiatric medication, you cannot do auditing, which therefore you cannot do Scientology, and you cannot go free according to Scientology. So a lot of people that are Scientologists that somehow are illegal PCs, the general way to deal with that would be come back next lifetime and you can continue on the bridge to total freedom. The one thing I never liked about that was you basically can't do anything, so what are you supposed to do? Kill yourself? That's kind of what a lot of people's thoughts and answers to me was when I was a little kid. That was what they basically told me, is if you were an illegal PC, it would be better just to not be alive anymore. They call it dropping their body, and therefore they can come back in a previous lifetime and they continue on the bridge. Obviously there's something definitely wrong with that, and you don't want people thinking that the only way to go free is to do Scientology, so we must just, drop our body and come back next lifetime, because it's all a bunch of crap. That's not how it actually works. But that's one of Scientology mechanisms, I guess, to keep people far away from psychiatry, because psychiatry and psychology and therapists could clearly help people that need help, and it would be a lot cheaper than going through these auditing processing. And the other thing would be, if you go to a therapist, you actually can get some help. Some people do need psychiatric medication. In my opinion, someone that would really need some of that medication would be Tom Cruise, acting like a psychopath. But they got him all juiced up, pumped, making him feel special, which is fine. And his best friend, little David Miscavige, is pumping him up about the whole situation, about how psychiatry is evil and bad. But you got that one guy, Perkins, who stabbed his mother 77 times on L. Ron Hubbard's birthday because he was hearing voices. And that's a clear example of how Scientology destroys people's lives and families and helps to ruin things. Because if the guy simply got some medication and got to see a psychiatrist, well, there you go. I'm sure he wouldn't have just freaked out and killed his mother. And of course she was an OT and for Scientology, if you're OT, you're supposed to be able to predict and know if these kind of situations are going to happen. The other thing that I was taught in Scientology was if anything bad ever happened to anyone, it's because they pulled it in, which means they did something bad and karma basically brought it back to them. So, anything that happens to you, you're responsible for that. They told you you're responsible for your own conditions. The other thing that I was taught was the whole thing about how if something's going on, they call it the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics, which is a way of justifying, doing things that are incorrect, such as if, a Scientologist does a criminal act, and instead of Scientology all falling down and taking the blame for it, that person will take the blame for it, because if they did something in their own mind that they thought was a good action, a good example for that would be Mary Sue Hubbard taking orders from L. Ron Hubbard to steal documentation from the U.S. government, and of course 11 Scientologists went to prison for that whole thing, including Mary Sue Hubbard, and they took the blame for it, and L. Ron Hubbard and the Church of Scientology did not really get blamed too much for that, even though they should have, because the policy that they would have to follow was the greatest number for the greatest number of dynamics, which would be, well, okay, you guys should take the blame because Scientology, shouldn't take the blame for this, because you guys are ultimately doing a good thing for Scientology by taking those documentations, and it's better to lie than tell the truth, and you're helping Scientology at the end, and at least Scientology got help somehow, even though you guys all got screwed over. That's pretty much the way that whole thing works. And being a Scientologist as a child, they would constantly try to scare people, and I know I was scared as a child of people that were non-Scientologists. I was afraid that there were all these bad suppressive SPs, evil people out there to get me. You're taught that there's 20% SPs in the world, so out of every 5 people there's 1 SP, and that 1 SP can drag down the rest of the population. If you have 5 people and 1's an SP, that 1 SP can drag down the other 4, and that's what you're taught. And if you're around an SP, you go PTS, which means a potential trouble source. So if, say, you're around an SP, that SP can now make you cause problems, and you can basically get ill, have issues like that, and potentially turn into an SP if you're around an SP. L. Ron Hubbard also writes that all problems and all situations like that come from psychiatry, the cause of all problems in the universe. Another thing I learned being in Scientology as a child was that an SP can destroy numerous lives. Besides it being contagious, you can end up ultimately dead from an SP. So they really terrify you with the thought of SPs, and the only way to be free and have a good life, you're taught, is to be a Scientologist. And my job was to, as a child, always try to get people to become Scientologists, because that's the only way you can free them. And if you're not a Scientologist, the standard word is a WOG, W-O-G. They would say, oh, he's just a WOG, don't worry about him, and that kind of a situation, which is really not a good way of, talking about people that aren't in your cult. Of course, I thought it was a religion, and at the time. So, just recall and know the reason why Scientology hates psychiatry so much is they're terrified that psychiatry will speak out and help other people with their problems, and Scientology will lose victims and won't be able to brainwash them so easily. So that is a short little story of my humble opinion and my experiences as a child Scientologist, and I really hope that Anonymous and other people watching this kind of get the idea of, to some degree, how it was growing up in Scientology and the scare tactics they use to control an individual. It was good talking to you. This is Tommy Gorman. It is February 13th, and I will see you guys the next picket on L. Ron Hubbard's birthday.